And it's welcome to another episode of Writer on the Road. Today I've got with me the beautiful Clare Connolly, and she is just glowing and healthy and smiling. And this is going up on YouTube, so you can actually look at Clare and listen to her at the same time, which is really exciting. I've just come in from walking the dogs, Clare, so I'm a bit of a mess. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Now, Claire and I have had a little bit of a chat before the podcast, and I've forewarned her about what we're going to do to her today, and she's still smiling, so we're in there with a chance, everyone, to really find out some great information today. But I'm going to start, Claire, and I've warned her I'm going to do this because this is something that I've always wanted to do, everyone. I've always wanted to read this paragraph, and I've always wanted to read it in the first person I, so that it was all about me. Unfortunately, I'm reading it all about Claire, which is great for Claire, not so good for me. So, Claire, I'm going to just give you this beautiful introduction. In not quite 3 years, I have had more than 10 number one bestsellers on the Amazon.com and Amazon.com UK romance erotica charts. I've been in the top 15 exclusive authors across all genres for more than 20 months in the UK, and in the top 100 in the States on their Amazon stores. I've had an iTunes number 2 bestseller, number 1 on the romance charts. I've signed a multi-book deal with Harlequin Mills and Boon, and I'm now heading towards 1 million digital sales in my indie titles alone. Claire, you have got such a story to share with us today. Congratulations first and foremost.
Thank you.
Thank you. And tell us about all that excitement. I'm assuming, let's start at the end. Let's hear about that Harlequin Mills and Boon contract that you've got.
Okay, so that's actually really, I suppose, the beginning. I wrote my first full manuscript at 15 and submitted it to Harlequin. And as we were saying before the podcast, it was back in the days where you would, print out a big chunk of words and post it off and wait forever. And I was rejected pretty summarily, and it's terrible. I've still got that manuscript, but it has always been what I want to do, to write for Harlequin. So even my indie journey came out of the fact that I was attempting to write for Harlequin and had been rejected in the early days.
Yeah, and rejected no more. I believe you have made your point, and everyone knows that I'm a rampant indie, so I'm very keen to hear your indie journey. But of course, as you said, other people are curious too. And again, everybody, I've got this back to front, but let's go to the good bits first. What made someone who is so very successful as an indie author go hybrid? And I know a lot of people do, and it's a topic that really interests me.
Yeah, sure. So primarily because I've always wanted to write for Harlequin. So even though I think that the indie journey is amazing and I'll never give that up, I love what I do there, and I love that the readers that I've connected with. But I have just always wanted to work for Harlequin, or write for Harlequin rather, and I can do that. I'm quite fortunate in that I write quite quickly. I have a good output. I write full time. So I should be able to meet my Harlequin commitments as well as my self-publishing.
Wow, how exciting is that, everybody? This is what we all aspire to. We know that it happens, and we know from our previous interviews, everyone, that Harlequin really looks after its authors. And I think, especially here in Australia, everybody I speak to who writes for Harlequin and the Mirror line and all those kinds of things, everyone's really happy. We seem to be spoiled over here with how they look after us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the other thing. I have learned so much. I've submitted, I think, I've had 3 books accepted, and the 4th one is with my editor now. So that's not a lot really in terms of what I've written in indie, but what I've learned working with Megan Haslam, who's my editor, and Flo Nicol, who I'm working with on the Dare line, has just been amazing. And they're lovely. They're just the nicest people, and they love romance. I get emails from them and they just make my day. So it's been a really fulfilling experience already.
Yeah, I remember I had Flo Nicol lined up to come on the podcast, everybody, and then she had to go back and ask permission from Harlequin, and then she never got back to me, so I'm assuming they said no. I might try again.
How interesting.
Yeah, because I'm sure she'd have some stories to tell as well. Look, that's a really great place for us to really get serious. What kinds of things have you learned since you've been with them? Because as I said, you sold 1 million books before you came on board with Harlequin. I would have said that there was nothing more to teach you, and we were hoping that you'd teach us. But you're still learning, always learning. What are some of the big things? What are some of the big things you've taken away?
That's a really good question. Just, I guess, It's hard to say because I wouldn't have said that anything was lacking from my indie work, but certainly in terms of writing for Harlequin, each line has got quite a specific style. So Harlequin Presents that I write for, I started writing what I would have considered pretty squarely Harlequin Presents, but over the years I went away from that just a little bit, but enough because I had the freedom to with indie writing. And then coming back and writing for Harlequin Presents, I've just tightened up and sort of made sure that what I'm writing really fits the premise of the Harlequin Presents line. So, your alpha hero and in particular working towards one significant and heart-stopping black moment, whereas in my indie books I think I'd got into the habit of sort of peppering a few black moments in throughout, and I think with Harlequin the way that I have ended up writing them is always moving towards one big black moment.
Yeah, and that's something that's really important, everybody, and you need the professional eyes of an editor to guide that process. And whether you're indie or not, I'm assuming you all 43 novels, everybody, that this lady has got out, I'm assuming you had an editor for those as well.
Yeah, for most of them, not for the first ones, and they're pretty, I look back at those and they still sell, and so I do need to get those retrospectively edited because I sort of curl my toes when I think, although with that being said, my first book that I released is one of my favourites. The story was just so compelling and so full of emotion that I think that people will overlook the occasional typo so long as the story is good.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast on the self-publishing formula only yesterday, and they were interviewing a guy who is a prolific short story writer, and if I was good I'd remember his name, but it was yesterday and I can't. But he was very liberal in accepting mistakes in his books, but the podcast formula guys pulled him a little bit into line and said, well, really, we can do better than that. And I agree with you, we can do better than that. It's worth going through the editing process and everyone.
Absolutely.
Right from the beginning. But it's interesting that you've taken it one step further now and you've got the Harlequin editors who are very specific and very professional in what they want, which is, I'm guessing, benefiting your stories.
Yeah, definitely. So my debut Harlequin novel comes out in July and I absolutely love it. I mean, I really do love everything I write, and that's something I would say too. I think sometimes people can fall into the trap, especially as indies, to push out books that they're not necessarily 100% happy with, and I think that's the real downside of self-publishing, is that there can be a glut of books that probably shouldn't be out there, but that the ones that work and that are well written will rise to the top in that market. That's sort of the nature of the beast. But I can say genuinely that every book I've put out, so I write quite quickly, but then I leave them for a good 3 to 6 months before I go back and edit them and release them. So when I get them up there, I'm always thrilled with the package, or I wouldn't put them out.
Yeah, and look, so professional, Indy, you say you write quite quickly. Now, you started this or your latest journey in 2014.
That's right.
Now, guys, I've got to tell you this, 43 novels and 6 anthologies. We'll talk about the anthologies in a moment. But that is a huge output. And those novels are all around the 50,000 mark or 50,000 mark, aren't they? So
that's right.
You better tell us, you better spill right now. How many words a day do you write?
Yeah, okay, and I think there's a danger in this because everyone is different, and I know Annie Seaton writes quite quickly too because we're in a Facebook group together at the moment, and you got a hungry puppy. He didn't like his walk being cut short.
Everybody, I'm not going to cut this because this is a real slice of life. My daughter is on dog keeping quiet duty and she's failing miserably. So she's here now and she's going to take the dog outside. And I'm blushing, everybody, because the dog has interrupted what you were saying. Please continue, Clare.
No. I was saying Annie Seaton, I think, also writes quite quickly, and everybody's different. For me, because I have a 6 and a 4-year-old, and so when I started writing in earnest, I think my little girl might have been 6 or 9 months old, really little, and I had them at the point where they were napping at the same time every day. So I knew I had a very limited time to write. So I would structure my whole day around getting ready to write as effectively as I could in the small window I had. And so many thousands of words were written with my little girl like a koala on my chest while I kind of typed out because she's never been a good sleeper, whereas my son would give me, 3 hours. But that that mentality has held even as I've got a bit more time now. So I generally, I read this great blog post on Valerie Parv's blog about how we're at our most creatively effective before we fall asleep, right before we fall asleep, and right after we've woken up. And without knowing it, that's what I sort of do. So I go to bed and always just make some quick notes about what I'm going to do the next morning. Then I wake up and I tend to write 2,000 words before anyone else has woken up in the house. So I know that if I can't get back to do it again, to work at all that day, I've got at least 2,000 words down.
Yeah. So there's the secret, everybody. 2,000 words before the house wakes up. Now, Claire's being a little bit generous with herself here because your children are still very young.
Yeah, well, 6 and 4, nearly 5. So they're also quite close in age. So it was sort of a chaotic, busy time. But I'd always wanted to write, and having little kids at home is no holiday. It was busy and it was stressful. But at the same time, I knew that if I didn't tick this box while I had the opportunity to at least be at home, then it would become increasingly difficult once I went back to my old job, which I loved, and I was looking forward to getting back to it, but it would have made the time very scarce to write.
Yeah.
And hats off to people who work full-time and juggle families and still carve out the time to write. That just is amazing.
Yeah. I'm assuming you're not going back to work now?
No, well, this is my work now.
Yeah. And your day job is. Yeah, I used to liken staying home with my young children, and everybody knows how much I adore them because I prattle on about them all the time. But I always liken it to Gwen Harwood's poem, there where she's sitting on the park bench and it's there sucking my soul. And anyone who thinks being a stay-at-home mother is easy is so very, very wrong because it's all about them.
It's all about them. And as you say, I adore my children and I would, all the cliches, I would give my life for them, and they're amazing, but they're full on. And it's hard. And I did find it quite deadening at times because the days are really long. And, people give you all those really hackneyed phrases like the days are, the days are long, but the years are short, and yet it's so true. I find myself saying that to my friends with small children now. It's like, it goes so fast. Yeah,
and I've got, what are mine, 17 and 15, and they're about to fly the coop. Well, I wish they would fly the coop so I can go off in my caravan, but they keep hanging around. That's mean, isn't it? I do love you guys.
No.
Yeah.
No, but the writing, finding the time to write is... I guess I got the timing right in terms of having the break from my career to be at home with the kids. And had it not proven successful, I would have had to find a way to juggle writing with working with children because, as you know, it's a compulsion. Like you said, you keep coming back to it because it's not an option. If you're a writer, you write.
Yeah, and I think everybody, look, we can stop the interview now because I think that statement is something that we forget. If you're a writer, you write. Now, I'm putting out a 30-day blog thing starting tomorrow, and my opening sentences are, it's as easy and as hard as that. If you're a writer, you write. But getting to it and doing it and getting those 2,000 words out at the start of the day, you must almost walk through the rest of the day with a clear conscience knowing you've got it behind you.
Well, that's the theory, but the problem I have is I am a very compulsive person. So, and I find when I'm in a book, the characters become so real to me and their story becomes so real that I write like I read. I'm a real fast reader. I'll read a book in a sitting. And so, I am fortunate that my husband is so patient with this because when I'm writing something, I will write potentially 14,000 words in a day, and then I'll go to sleep, and then I'll start and I'll do another 10, and so I can write 50,000 words in 5 days because it overtakes me. And that's a burden. Like, I know that sounds really amazing, but it does mean I feel like that's my real world for that time, and I'm kind of ghosting through everything else. And then it's this massive unshackling and relief when I can say, the end, I'm back. And out, I've birthed it.
And the children are sitting at her feet making themselves cheese sandwiches to survive the time.
Very self-sufficient.
You can imagine what's going to happen when they're teenagers, everybody. They're going to wait till mummy sinks into her 50,000 words and there will be hell to pay.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, the delicious potential. I can't wait to have you back. Now, your first story was called The Italian Billionaire's Betrayal. What a beautiful, delicious title.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Okay, so that is, where to start? So Megan is my heroine, and she's a really sassy English doctor who has the misfortune of sharing a flat with a ruggedly handsome Italian chap called Pietro. And Pietro is the black sheep of his family, and it's his grandfather's 80th birthday coming up. And he asks her to come to Italy and pretend to be his girlfriend because he thinks someone like Megan on his arm will be sure to impress his family, who aren't at all impressed by him. She goes to Italy with him because she's that kind of person who she loves him and she's a really loyal, caring friend. And in an uncharacteristic night of sort of letting her hair down and letting loose, has a one-night stand with an Italian man called Matteo. Fast forward 24 hours, arrives at the grandfather's villa, and the one-night stand is Pietro's older brother, who decides that the only way to save his younger brother Pietro from this obviously deceiving and conniving and ne'er-do-well woman is to seduce her into his bed. So it's full of all those mistaken premises, and she's really a good, kind person who, and I love those. I love the mistaken identity sort of trope.
Yeah, and I love how the older brother always comes in and he's very stern, and he always gets the girl in the end, and it turns out to be the right decision because the younger brother really doesn't have much moral background.
Well, no, and in that one, Pietro is a bit of a weakling and definitely morally questionable. Megan does ask him to clear it all up, and he won't because he, for the first time ever, has brought home someone who his family really like, and everything's going swimmingly for him, and so he's quite selfish and faced with the choice of letting down her longtime friend or going after what she wants. She chooses to be a good friend.
Yeah, I think we'll link this book in our podcast, guys, to Amazon because I'm actually going to go and buy it. I'm quite hooked just with you telling me about it. I used to love those kinds of stories, and I know you said you still read, and I'm thinking I don't even know how you do that. I buy the books and I look at them, and I bought Amy Andrews. You mentioned her earlier, her footballer series. I think I've got however many she's written now, and they're sitting there and they smile at me every morning, and I go, I'm next. You're on the list next, but it never happens. Now, let's fast forward to your latest novel, which is coming out, as you said, in July with Harlequin Presents, is it?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, yes. What's that one about?
So that is, it's a beautiful story. It's, it's about second chances and having walked away from the relationship to keep her family happy. He comes back and, he was never good enough for her, so he's gone out and proved himself, and now her family have hit hard times, and he comes back with an indecent proposition. But it's got a lot of emotional heart. My heroine's sister, Libby, actually died, and it destroyed the family, when she was a teenager, and she was the older sister and really the golden girl. And so it's also about how I think sacrifice is sort of a long-running theme in my books. Nothing's ever perfect. Nothing's ever black and white and easy. And she gave up what she really wanted because it was more important to her not to fracture her family and to keep the peace. And ultimately, the position that the parents put her in by shutting down the relationship.
Yeah, and they're all values driven, aren't they? And that's why we keep reading romance novels. Although we've read, as you said, a million of them, we go back for more and more because our heroines, you talked about alpha males at the very beginning, but our females are pretty damn strong nowadays, aren't they?
They are, and that's the balance to strike, because even when I never like it if a heroine is, you can write a heroine that life happens to, because life does happen to us, but I also want to know that my heroines have tried their hardest to climb out of whatever pit they've fallen into. I'm not really a fan of the damsel in distress trope, and I think that's gone out of vogue, and I have written a few books, particularly chic books, where because of circumstances. Maybe she's gotten into a situation that she wouldn't otherwise, but I always make it clear that she had agency over that. I think that's really important, and to make them sassy even when their back's against a wall.
Yeah. Now, you've written your first book, The Italian whatever, in Billionaire's Betrayal in 2014. You've got your new one
Correct.
out now. In a very short period of time, tell us your learning journey from book 1 to book 44.
Okay, definitely confidence. So I remember when I first wrote it, and the speed that comes with that. I used to think it was almost a fluke when you wrote a book and finished it. Now I know that I can do it, and okay. So things I've learned in category romance is to bring the reader in at a really interesting point. I think starting the book at the right spot is very important. Probably that took me 5 books to work out, and I think my third or fourth book, I actually did go back and rewrite, not once it was published, but in the editorial phase, I scrapped the first 3 chapters and started it again, because I just think it's so important to bring them in, make sure the conflict is really strong. So if from the beginning you know why your couple can't be together, and there's loads of blogs and books and that talk about this, the conflict can't be something that a conversation could resolve. It has to be like in The Italian Billionaire's Betrayal, as an example. She went and she asked her friend to be honest, and so then it was an internal conflict for her of, does she let her friend down, who in good faith she's promised to help, or does she self-serve? And obviously, because we want to like her, she makes the right decision, and even though her friend at that point is a bit of a jerk, we still respect that she's made that decision. So I think that's a good conflict, and his conflict of actually being attracted to his brother's girlfriend, or who he thinks is his brother's girlfriend, it's quite messy.
Yeah, and you attended your first romance writers conference in Adelaide last year, and yeah, everybody, we missed it, but we'll go to the one this year. Well, actually, I haven't organised that. I might even miss this year as well if I don't hurry up. But now I know we were talking about how you met Amy Andrews, and everybody putting this pair together would be just the best
Well,
fun.
you'll get to see it if you come to Brisbane, because we'll both be there.
Yeah, everyone, I might tee that up now. Claire, if I can get Amy on board, can I get both of you on the podcast together? Because between you, your talents and your personalities would mesh just beautifully.
Sure. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah,
see,
fine.
we did it, everyone. We're on a roll. Now we've just got to convince Amy. But at that Romance Writers Conference, you were an indie publisher. At that stage, you hadn't crossed over to hybrid yet. Is that where you made the decision to do that?
Yeah, I certainly hadn't been submitting to Harlequin during my indie time, but it was always a long-held dream. So as soon as I knew that the conference was going to be on, and it was actually about 2 kilometres around the corner from me, so it was an absolute no-brainer to go. And I registered to pitch. And if anyone is listening who's an RWA member who's contemplating pitching, or it was so nerve-wracking. I'm a really nervous person in terms of having to put myself out there. And, I worked in legal recruitment for years. I'm used to being on the other side of the desk and doing the interviewing. And I was just shaking in my boots, but I did it. I forced myself to pull up my big girl pants, and I went. And I chose to pitch to Rebecca Saunders from Hachette and Joanne Grant from Harlequin, who's, I've forgotten her title, but she's a senior acquisitions editor, I think, maybe for Europe or something very fancy, and made me shake even more. But she was lovely. It was first cab off the rank, and she was really put me at ease and asked me to submit a full manuscript, which I did. And it happened so quickly after that. And I think that I would say that too, you can go to the conference and be nervous and not know what's going to happen. But if you get in front of the right person, and I didn't even pitch myself very well, but if you are confident in what you do, then it can open such amazing doors. It was honestly such a valuable experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a message that we could give to everybody. Opening amazing doors. If you don't stand up and have a go, you will miss out, because no one knows that you're there. So the worst thing is not standing up in the first place, would you say?
Absolutely. And I think that as an extension of that, that's what came out of my indie work. And as I've said, I am tickled pink to be writing for Harlequin, because that has been, seriously, I could die happy. Like, this is my life dream, to write for Harlequin. But I was never going to not get my books out there. So the indie thing gives everybody that opportunity, and it's scary. And I think people look at it and think that there's either that their books are going to flop, or that it's a bit of a mystery and they don't know how to crack into it. But it's amazing, and if you are struggling to get published, publish it yourself. Let the readers be the gatekeepers, and you will get the editorial feedback via Amazon 1-star reviews and whatever, and read them and take it. It's because that's your learning journey. But get your book out there if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think that is a message. And some people just go on that indie journey and stay on that journey. We all have our personal dreams and goals as well. And yes, everybody, one day I want to get published by Harlequin as well. That's why I'm being friends with all these people. I'm trying to smooth you up. Oh, okay, that's not true. It's just that I like to talk a lot. Now, I want to pick on that a little bit further. Following your dreams is really important. Getting your book out there as an indie is really important. There's lots of people around to help us to be as professional as we can. That learning curve, that learning journey is all very exciting. And then stepping up to the pit, or whatever what do you step up to? The base.
Plate?
Softball. Yeah, plate. Thank you. You step up to the plate and ask. When you were pitching to Joanne Grant, everybody, it's always a good idea to write these names down so that we can go along behind and use them. Always read the acknowledgement section in the books, because you get names and then you can pitch. But when you did do this pitch, did you tell them about your indie background, or did you just rely on the strength of your current novel?
No, and in fact, so I absolutely went in and told her about my indie. I took in a couple of my indie books, because some of them are available in print as well as and I don't have any within reach, but I had these little Lindt chocolates made which had my book covers as wraps. So I had a gift pack for her, and it turns out she knew who I was. So which was, she didn't realise until afterwards, but she was saying, why is your name so familiar? And then she, but I think the reason to tell her about my indie success was it proves that I can write more than one book. And I think they've got an eye to that very much.
43 books, please. Yes, you didn't. You really did prove a point on that one. And I'm going to come back to those chocolates in a minute, because I am really curious. Did you? And I don't want to know dollars, and well, I do, but you're not going to tell me. Sorry, everyone. Did it put you in a position to negotiate more strongly for your contract?
No. I think that with that, Harlequin is has a very standard rule of engagement.
Okay, yeah, because I wondered whether, because I know a lot of indie authors go hybrid with big publishers, and it puts them in a position of strength. And I don't know how Harlequin works, but they have a mirror line, don't they? That's their biggest line. Yeah.
Correct. So that's more for, so the Harlequin Mills and Bourne based out of London that I'm writing for is more your category. But I think Harlequin Mirror is, so HarperCollins owns all of Harlequin, don't they? And I think the Harlequin Mirror that's based in Sydney focus on like Rachel Johns, women's fiction, or not even just women's fiction, but longer form fiction and novels.
Are you interested in moving in that direction, or you're very happy with your category romance?
Yeah, no, I've actually had the good fortune as well to connect with Hayley Nash, and for my longer form books, she's representing me. So, and I have had some conversation with some publishers about that, but at the moment, I have enough irons in the fire.
That's so exciting, child. Congratulations.
It is. Thank you. I am actually writing the most amazing women's, well, I think it's the most amazing because I'm in my book and so I'm obsessed with it, but a women's fiction which will be about 120,000 words, and it's just, I'm very excited about it, but I would rather write it not in contract, just so that I can, see where it goes.
And I think that's a bit of advice to everybody that I'm going to pull out of that statement, is that sometimes you don't need the pressure. Sometimes you don't need to be writing to jump through hoops and fit a particular style. That you've kept that freedom to be able to explore and test your own boundaries in the privacy, I guess, of your own writing room. But I did some very quick maths because I'm such a great maths teacher, and I worked out 120,000 words at 14,000 words a day. You'll have it done in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I just have to squeeze it in. So it's my weekend project.
Oh.
So I have to, the thing is with my Harlequin commitments is that the release schedule is amazing. Like I've got a book out in July, then December, then February, then I think April with them. So, and I also am quite anxious not to let my indie side drop. So within that, I have to squeeze in, or I have some novels to squeeze into release. So I have to find the time that suits, to do that.
Sounds very much like Amy Andrews, everybody. These girls are peas of a pod because I think her schedule is just as rigorous. Now, we haven't even touched on the indie side of things. It's because what I love so much is the business side of indie writing and finding out what you have to do with newsletters and getting your books up. I noticed you talked about ebooks and print and all those kinds of things as well. There's way too much here for one interview, child. I'm just going to have you back again and again. Because
Anytime.
The really important thing that I want to know about is these Lindt chocolates.
Lindt chocolates. So they are, they're amazing. So they're little tiny, I think 200-gram Lindt bars that just have the book cover wraps. They're beautiful. Yeah, great business card, an edible business card.
Yeah, look, I want to make some. How do I go about it? Who did you contact and who came up with this idea?
I Googled it and I found a company in Melbourne. Now, I should be able to give them a plug and I can't remember their name. Hang on, let me just have a look.
It's all right. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yes,
yeah.
I'll let you know. But they're amazing. So I actually needed some done in a hurry and they did them, I think, a 3-day turnaround. So
yeah, everybody, I would love to give away a box of Lindt chocolates with my book covers wrapped around it, but it'd just have to be the one book. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Whereas you can have an assortment. You can have an assorted box because you've got so many. I'm going to keep moving. I'm sorry, everybody, that we're rushing, but this woman has too much going on in her life. I blame you, Claire. It's all your fault. 6 anthologies. Tell me about those.
Well, the anthologies are basically, you spoke about the business side of indie publishing and there are so many ways to go about it. So I started off Amazon exclusive, which is, I'm going to assume that you and your listeners don't know, even though I'm sure you do. Amazon exclusive basically lets you go into their Kindle Unlimited lending library, which means basically like Netflix, people pay say, I think it's a $10 to $12 subscription. And for that, they can download any titles that are in the library up to, say, 10 on their device at any one time. Anyway, I made the decision to go into the lending library, which was a really good decision for me in the end. I think romance readers are very voracious and so they sort of chew through content very quickly. But for people who would prefer to buy the books, I thought what I'll do is I'll take 4 of my books, put them into one and sell that for $2.99. So it's actually cheaper than you could buy 4 of the books. And the way Amazon works with their royalty rate is it was a better royalty rate for me anyway if people bought the compendium than if they bought them individually. And I thought if I find an author I love and I'm going away on holiday, I'd rather download one anthology of their books and have it on my Kindle and off you go.
Yeah. And look, this woman binges on everything. You write hours and hours and hours a day when you're in the mood. I noticed that you said she binged on my podcast, everybody, so I forgive her everything and love her dearly. And so I could imagine that you would binge read as well.
Absolutely.
When you talk about anthologies, I guess you're talking really box sets, aren't you?
Correct. And so I curate them quite carefully by theme. So what I want to do, and my covers can quite clearly show what kind of book you're getting. So I've got one box set which is Happily Ever After, and they are my books which sit, all of my books are sort of romance erotica. You know, there are sex scenes and they're sexy, but these are the books that probably more closely sit in a bit of a sweet context. So there's that real sort of the Harlequin Cherish Your Desire feeling. Then I've got ones which is, you know, Mediterranean tycoons, and I've got this gorgeous buff man on the cover with, you know, sort of island coastline, and they're books where, as you can see, you know what you're going to get there. You're going to get those sexy, swarthy, alpha dominating heroes, and, you know, sunshine, and you're going to feel like you've had a Greek island holiday at the end of it. Because I guess I'm going to assume that people who buy my anthologies might not have read anything of mine before, so I want to give them a really good journey of my books.
Yeah, and I'm madly flicking through Claire's website as she's speaking so that I could see all these covers, but I'd have to click on them one by one. There's so many of them that you had to put on the front page, but beautifully organised, very simple website, everybody, and you've categorised them for us to go through and have a look at, which is really interesting as well. Do you do your own website?
I do my own website, and I have to do a shout out here to Samara Parish, who... A funny story, Samara and I actually went to high school together, but she was the year above me and we hadn't spoken at all. She's a writer. I think she's based out of Canberra. And we reconnected at the recent RWA. I kept seeing her and thinking, I know this woman from somewhere. I know her. Sure enough, it's Samara from school. And recently I put out a call on my website, on my Facebook, saying, I need to do something with my website. What do I do? And there were so many great suggestions from so many people. And I think it was Samara who said, try grouping your books by category, because I just had them as this big, you know, here they are. And I do have a lot of titles, and it can be quite confusing or almost overwhelming, so you don't end up even reading them properly because it's just words on a page, you know, whereas now I think broken into sections, that's quite helpful.
Yeah, and for someone like me who chooses the kind of romance that she likes to read, everybody, they're split into excuse me, hometown hero. You've got your alpha tycoons, but no alpha tycoonesses. I might have to talk to you about that. And your steamy sheiks. I mean, how could we... Powerful rulers of desert kingdoms and the women who bring them to their knees. How can you resist, everybody? This is real tried and true romance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mean the chic trope? Or the...
Yeah. Well, all of your books, there's no mucking around with you. I would know what book I was buying simply from how you've categorised it and the titles. And I think that's very important, not to confuse your readers, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that was one of the bits of advice that I gathered. So it's sort of when we lived in the UK, which was 8 years ago, I think we came back, but I wrote every day, and I sort of 800 words was about all I could get out then. You know, I hadn't learned to be fast yet, but I did a lot of research too, and I read, like, Valerie Parv has some great writing books out, Stephen King, but the Valerie Parv particularly because I was always interested in writing romance. And I guess you learn by osmosis, and I read Harlequin after Harlequin after Harlequin after Harlequin, and, you know, and that is, the title is often just a really incisive précis of what you're going to get.
Yeah, and now I know we keep going back to your indie author, parallels Harlequin, because that's what you've always wanted to. Now you talk about, you write romance erotica. Now I know Amy Andrews drew the line at erotica. She was steamy romance. So would you say that you tip over into the erotica in some of your books, or do you pull back from straight erotica? And I know there's ways of working this out, but I haven't got a clue. I'm not even game to go there.
Now, because I binge listened to your podcast, I'm probably going to misattribute this, but I think it was Amy who said that, you know, was it Amy? That the sex scenes in romance novels happen within an emotional context. And that's where I think that I don't think there'd be a huge differentiation in steaminess between Amy and my books. They're not, I don't write... There are a lot of books that come under the erotica banner which are purely the sex angle and very graphic and quite gratuitously graphic, in my opinion. I think that where they come into romance erotica mainly is because in Amazon there are categories that you put them into, and that's so mine are contemporary romance and romance erotica. And they would appeal to a reader of quite an erotic book, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot about this, everybody, because I just check this out all the time. And I was listening to a podcast, as I do, on the way to school, and they said if you're writing pure erotica, then people don't want a story. They don't want a story at all. They just want the action. But if you're writing a romance erotica, and as Amy and now yourself say, it's all in an emotional context and the story is still at the forefront. So I wanted to clarify that, everybody, because this woman has so many beautiful books. The picture on her website is quite erotic, but it's also very, very romantic, and the website is in black and white, which intrigues me because it looks so classy and classic. Now,
Thank you.
Yeah, you came up with that?
I did.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Yep, sorry, keep going.
So again, I did have a look at a lot of the romance erotica authors that I admire, but I think so, and particularly like Sylvia Day and Meredith Wild, but I think my website is very different to theirs in the end, but that was sort of my progression when I was styling it.
Yeah, and these are the decisions that you've had to make as an indie. You've got all your books out there. You've done I noticed you've got a newsletter. And I think what attracted me to you was the new cover of your new romance novel coming out with Harlequin. Did you get a say in the covers with them, or have you lost some of that autonomy that you've had as an indie?
Yeah, again, that's a learning process for me. So I don't have a say in the covers, but I completely trust them. They are the market leader in romance, so I'm very happy to. They want my book to do well. They want all their authors' books to do well, so they're going to give it its best chance as they see it. So I'm really happy. It's actually been lovely to pass that over to them and see what they come up with. And I still have the fun of doing my own covers, and I do my own covers for my indie work, so I get to choose my own couples and work out what the covers are going to be.
Yeah, and it probably frees up some time for you. I should imagine being able to pass off some of the business of an indie writer would be just a relief.
Yeah, it is, and it's lovely to wake up and sort of see that a book's gone live on a website. And I'm not very good at the business side of being an indie writer. I'm a writer, and I think if you let it, the business side could take over. And you have to be smart and you have to be savvy. But for example, I've pulled about 7 books out of the Amazon lending library with the intention of going on to wider market, because my first wider market book was a #2 bestseller on iTunes. I thought, oh, goodness gracious, there's this whole market I haven't tapped because I've been sitting squarely with Amazon. Well, I pulled them out of the lending library about 5 months ago and haven't put them onto iTunes because it takes time, and I don't have that much time. And what I do, I spend reading or writing or listening to your podcast now while I'm cooking.
Yeah, and everybody, I am getting someone on. Who am I getting on? Oh, I'm getting someone on about virtual assistants, and I've already teed it up with her, and do you think I can remember her name? But anyway, we have virtual assistants coming up because we all want one. We want someone to do all that business stuff so that it can free up our time to do the parts that we love. And I think that's something that we learn. Businessmen for years have hired secretaries and assistants to do all the stuff that frees them up to be the creatives that they are, that drives the business forward. Here we are trying to do it all ourselves. More and more people are waking up to the fact we actually need secretaries and assistants to do that everyday stuff so that it frees us up to do what we're best at.
I need one just to do my day-to-day houseworky kind of admin, pay the bills and, remind me when things are due and what I need at the shops. But I am in the process actually of bringing someone on board to help me just probably a day a week. Initially, I'll see how it works out. It's hard. I think the hard problem for me is finding the right person because I'm so protective of what I do and it's so much a reflection of me. But with things, I do now need someone to help with the business side. So I've got to bite the bullet there.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I've got my daughter, and she keeps threatening to leave home on me, and I'm saying you can't go. You've got to stay. And if you do leave, I'm coming with you. That's the way it works in our family. You have mother will travel.
Perfect.
Now, one last question. I just wanted to very quickly touch on. You write 14,000 words, not every day, I know. 2,000 is definitely a day. What about, if you, we're kicking into dragon dictation, and I've got someone coming on to talk to us about that. I remember his name. I think it was Adam Scott or Scott someone. It's got the word Scott in it. Are you looking at dragon dictation, or are you going to keep risking the RSI thing?
Yeah, so definitely not for me. I can see the benefits to it. And someone, who is it that was it? Barbara Cartland, who used to dictate all her books. But for me, I think you engage a different part of your brain when you're speaking to when you're writing. And I definitely find the typing a really integral part to my getting my creative ideas out.
Yeah, and look, I've tried it, and I tried it on the way to school, and other than concentrating on the road instead of my story, I do find that when I look at it, I've got a different style happening, in that it's a talking style rather than a thinking style. So when I write, I think, and obviously when I talk, I don't, which is something that I've now learnt about myself. Not attractive, everybody, especially when I'm doing podcasts. But handing over to you is a really good way of getting around that. I get my guests to do all the talking for me. Now, you blog prolifically as well.
No, I'm pretty peripatetic with my blog, I would have to say, and I am also with my newsletter. I'm really bad with that stuff. That's why I need help. I need help. I blog. I don't like to just blog about my books, and so I blog randomly when things occur to me. But I probably average a blog a month, if that.
Yeah, I'm very proud of you. Blogs are the bane of everybody's lives, and so are newsletters.
Yeah,
And then I've got to think, yeah.
They are. And I think Facebook has made it so easy for us. I have, a good following on Facebook, and I really enjoy connecting with them. And also I can schedule my content. So I can have a 2-hour session where maybe my husband and I are watching a movie, and I just schedule a year's worth of posts so that I know that every couple of weeks something's going to pop up. And I find that a lot easier than the newsletter or whatever.
Did you just say your husband and your downtime was you sitting in front of a computer watching a movie while you schedule your wow.
Yeah, I know that's a bit tragic, isn't it? And like I said, he's very understanding.
We've got to get a husband on here, everybody. We've got to talk to a husband of a writer, and we could call it a day in the life of surviving a writing wife.
Yeah, but and again, I'm really terrible with remembering who people are, but it's some 19th century male writer who used to go up into his writing turret, and when inspiration took him, and there he would sit while the muse was in session, and he would write and he would write and he would write, and his wife would keep the children quiet and occasionally send up, cups of tea. I think, yeah, well, that would be really nice, actually, but I'm up packing school lunch boxes after I've written my 2,000 words and jamming them into backpacks and getting kids out the door, and it's life goes on around I have to squeeze my writing into the gaps still, even though I do it full time.
Yeah, now that's amazing, everybody. In my day, Mum used to say, get outside and don't come back till it's dark, but we're not allowed to do that anymore. It's called child abuse. And I did notice on your Facebook, which I had a very quick scroll through, you had something about your son's teaching telling him not to read or something. I thought, are we bizarre or what?
Yeah, look, I'm trying to make sense of this. So what it was, he is reading this series of books called Beast Quest, which are aimed at, it's really interesting. They're written by they're written under the nom de plume Adam Blade, but it's actually about 40 people who write them. So I'm not sure how that works, if the publishing house owns the concept and employs people, or anyway, there's 110 of these books. And when I was growing up, having a series of books like that was just the stuff of dreams, because as you know, I'm obsessive and I like to that's a childhood trait, obviously. Anyway, my son loves them, and he doesn't read confidently, but my husband reads them with him at night. So he went to his school library to borrow the next one in the series, and the librarian asked what grade he was in. He's only in grade 1. And she said, no, you're too young to be reading novels.
Yeah.
And I questioned her on it, and she was quite insistent that the content was inappropriate, and I thought, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I remember my daughter, Sam, everyone knows Sam, she was banned from the senior library. She was in kindy year 1 and year 2, and she wasn't allowed gravitate to the senior novels, which was grade 3 and above, until she was in grade 3. And there was a clear demarcation, which we felt was very bizarre even then. The fact that they're still doing it is even more. Buy him a little e-reader and let him download them.
Oh, well, we went to the public library, and the librarian was just what you think a librarian should be. And to my mind, a librarian is the gatekeeper to this wonderful world that, if, especially with little boys, there is evidence that suggests little boys aren't as prone to enjoy reading generally. So my feeling was certainly if you've got a little boy coming in before school wanting to borrow a book from the grade 2 section, you just let him. I felt really surprised. But the public librarian was wonderful. Says 110 of the things. We can't buy them all for him. They take, a week to read. And, I'm interested in that that's exactly what it is. They kind of graduate you up through the library as you get older.
Yeah, it's a crazy system. We want all the kids to read that we can from here on in. Now, Claire, I'm going to let you go because I did sidetrack you down there, I know, but I'm very interested in kids and reading, and I do get carried away with it. I know what I want to say, and it's not coming out of my mouth. What's next for Claire?
Sure. So more of the same. In addition to the women's fiction, which I'm really just absolutely loving, I just love to write, so more books.
All right, and you'll be here in Brisbane for the Romance Writers Conference?
Yes, I will be taking part actually in a panel which is led by Amy Andrews, and it's on self-publishing. So, and I'll also be doing a roundtable on self-publishing, which I have to say I don't feel like I'm particularly any kind of authority on, but it is. I love to talk to people about it, and I hope to give people confidence to just, if you've written a book that you would like to read, then find a way to get it out there.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're all about here. That's certainly what we're about at Writer on the Road. My next little while is taken up, everyone, with 30 days of blogging with a little course at the end to get you started on your writing journey, and to say that everyone's got a story to tell. You've certainly got an amazing story to tell. Not all of us will have 43 books and 1 million downloads in 3 years, but we will all make our mark in some way. And we've got all these beautiful people like Claire and Amy, and look, there's 1,000 other women out there, Annie Seaton, I could name a dozen, who are there to help you. If you're at all interested in writing romance, because that's what we blather on about all the time, please join up to the RWA newsletter or join up to them. They're a fantastic organisation, all voluntary. And they put these conferences together every year that are well worth attending. And you can always go up and say, "Oh, hi Claire, how are you? How are the kids?" Now, where can we find you?
So I am online at clareconnolly.com.
Very, very straightforward. That's how I found her myself. Plus on Facebook, where I found out about her son's reading habits. I thank you for your generosity today. We all wish you all the best with your new releases, with the new one coming out in July. We'll put that in the notes at the end of the show today. 4 more coming out in the next little while, every few months. And we look forward, Claire, to seeing your first women's fiction. I'm sure it'll be a bigger success like everything else that you've written.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, isn't she beautiful, everybody? That smile. Thank you very much. That's another episode of Writer on the Road, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.